All right. So again, I know we've had a few more people just now rolling in. So the way it's going to work is I got a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to go over the PowerPoint presentation. I've given this same PowerPoint presentation in the past. I updated it a little bit more recently just because there's been small changes here or there in the recruiting process and just from talking with coaches. Throughout this presentation, if you have questions or anything like that, put them down in the chat, and so that way, when I'm done with the presentation, I'll be able to just click on the chat and then I can answer the questions at the very end. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Right. All right. See. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Patrick Jones. I used to be a hitting coach in the Baltimore Orioles organization. Have a podcast, been able to interview hundreds of college coaches on my podcast at all different levels. And what has allowed me to just understand this process is honestly just relationships with college coaches at every single level, from, Power Four all the way down to, junior college level. And so with that, that's where a lot of this information comes from, is just talking with them and then helping players throughout the recruiting process and learning from that as well. So what I always like to do is I always like to start out, and this is the most important thing, and this is what I know. I work with other players, hitters across the country too, and it's at the end of the day, it's figuring out like, okay, like, what do we want? Like, what are we trying to go for? So I think if we can start at the end and then reverse engineer, that's going to help us figure out, what the game plan should be. So just figuring out, what kind of experience does your son want? Does it want it to be more of an academic? I just got off the phone with somebody who wants to really go to an Ivy League school. Like that's their dream. They're still, they're only a sophomore right now, but that's their dream. And so that's awesome. Like once you know that, then you reverse engineer, and it's like this is the plan we need to have in order to get there. For others, it's going to be, playing at the highest level possible. And so yeah, it could be it's, whether it's Power Four, whether it's, Division One, mid-major for them, whatever. They just want to play at the highest level possible. Maybe they want to go and get drafted, but that's their goal, that's their dream. And then there's other kids where they just want to have the best college experience possible. They want to go to football games, they want to go to basketball games, they want more of that well-balanced lifestyle. And there's no right or wrong answer with any of them. It's just important to know, because once you know it, as I was saying earlier, then we can come up and make a plan for how you go about getting there. But if you don't know, then you just are just chasing from thing to thing to thing, and that's when you end up, going from all these different showcases to camps to camps. And now a question that I like to ask players when it comes to what to experience is like, when you're 80 years old, like what advice would you give yourself right now? Because a lot of times, in the moment, we let status and social media and all these other things get in our way of what type of experience we would want. But if we can just zoom out and figure out what we would want when we're 80 years old, a lot of times we'll get to, the right answer. Now I'm going to talk about the recruiting timeline for college coaches. And this is very important because once you understand the timeline, then I think it's going to clear a lot of confusion for people, because I think this is why so many people are confused, just because they don't understand that the timeline for coaches at different levels. Okay, so the first level we're going to talk about is the Power Four recruiting window. So that window is going to start sophomore spring. And so what ends up happening is the top, and again, this is Power Four. So and especially with the transfer portal and everything, we're just talking about high school right now. So Power Four, that's going to start sophomore spring. That's only going to be for some of the top players in the country. Coaches have an off day or something like that, they'll go and they'll watch a high school game, and they'll even travel for a high school game if they're a recruiting coordinator, to go and watch a particular player who they have on their list as someone who could be a Power Four player at their program. And that's going to go all the way through the summer, all the way until the end of fall. And so For the most part, that Power Four recruiting window is pretty much wrapped up by the end of fall ball their junior year. Now, of course, there's things that happen and pop up and decommits and things like that. But at the Power Four level specifically, what ends up happening is the mid-major Division One level is now the main feeder system for the Power Four level. It used to be solely junior college, not necessarily the case anymore. It's right now it's more the mid-major Division One. So that's why so many of these mid-major Division One schools they get players come in, produce at a high level, go in the portal, and then a Power Four school picks them up because again they have a track record at already the Division One level. From a Power Four coach's standpoint, you got to think from their standpoint, it makes sense. And then normally summer entering senior year, this is when they're checking in on recruits. This is where if you see online on social media that somebody has their offer pulled and they decommitted out of nowhere, just know that they didn't just decide to decommit. A lot of times the coaches will have gone and watched them play and didn't like where they were from a development standpoint or attitude, whatever it is, and then they end up pulling the offer. Okay, so Power Four window, that's the majority. Of course, if you start throwing 100 miles an hour out of nowhere, they'll make room for you, but by and large, this is the window. Next is D1 mid-majors. So this is going to start summer entering junior year. This is when they'll start going to watch players, identify players. Is that summer entering junior year? Obviously, before that, they've already started to identify who they're going to watch because they don't just go to games randomly and just start, watching games. Like they go to look at specific players because they only have so much time. I mean, there's really only 8 weeks in the summer to go, and actually shorter than that because of the transfer portal. Because usually the first 3 weeks of June, coaches are going to summer league games to watch players in the portal. So it's even 4 to 6 weeks. So they are very specific and organized and tactical on who they go and watch. And then that's going to end summer entering senior year. So by the end of the summer, maybe a little bit in the fall of senior year, but by and large, the most part at the end of summer senior year, that window is going to be pretty wrapped up. The way a lot of times works is when the futures games happen, that's a lot of times when a lot of the Division One schools they change and they kind of go flip from one class to the next. So that's the D1 mid-major is summer entering junior year to summer entering senior year. That's the bulk. And this is what I was saying before. Usually entering junior year, that's when things get pretty serious. The one thing I will say too is, I want to view every single program like its own business in a sense. So like, University of Cincinnati or, West Coast, Cal University, Pepperdine, whatever it is, everyone's a different business. And what I mean by that is they all make different decisions based on how their business is performing. So for some schools, they're going to be more patient in the recruiting process. For other schools, they're going to, they're going to be more aggressive early on. And part of that is just determining on the level that they're at. And then a big part of it too is how their current team is performing. So I was talking to a mid-major Division One coach the other day, and he's like, "We'll know in a few weeks how many more roster spots we're going to have because it's going to depend on how well these guys end up playing, like what I personally see from our current team." Because that's the thing is it's really 1-year deals at the Division One level. So if they don't like how you're producing, then that can open up more spots down the road. And that's a Division II, Division III, NAIA, and JUCO level. That's going to start junior summer, entering senior year, and then that's going to end senior spring with some offers that are made after graduation. As I was saying with some of the other ones, there's going to be outliers. But by and large, this is when the bulk of it is going to be done. And this is why Division II, Division III, NAI, and JUCO don't start until later, is they know every kid wants to play Division I. And so they're not going to go and waste time and energy trying to convince a kid who wants to go Division I that they should come to their school. They're just going to wait and see who's left over, and then after that, that's who they're going to go after. All right. So showcases. So there's two main companies that own the showcase space, and I'm going to talk about both of them. So the first one is PBR. Okay, and PBR, it's a company that I think has grown really fast. I know they've been around for a lot longer than people think, but they've been growing very fast as of late. Based out of Illinois, Midwest, and they've grown nationally. I personally prefer PBR over any other showcase organization right now, just because it's going to be more affordable than the other ones, and it's widely used by college coaches. I think that's the other thing too. And shortly, I'll talk about how many showcases I recommend per year and things like that. But this is why it's so important, because a lot of times what ends up happening is if I recommend a player to a coach, I may send them video, I may send them metrics. A lot of times I'll also just send their PBR profile, because I know the first thing that the coach is going to do is they're going to go look them up on PBR. And so the most important thing, and what the thing is that I like PBR about the most, is it's just great for getting verified video and data. Don't expect to go to PBR and see a ton of coaches, college coaches at the event. You're pretty much just going there. You're going to get some video. You're going to get some data. And whether you run a 6.9 versus a 6.7.2, that doesn't necessarily matter. It's more so about, they're able to watch you from a video standpoint of your motions and movement and things like that. And then from a metric standpoint, it's just a baseline. Like if you're way up there and you're running a really bad 60, or you're not throwing hard, then that's obviously a red flag. But I mean, if you're in the same arena, then they're going to be more interested in getting more information on you. So this is more about just creating a job resume for yourself. You're not going to get the job just based on the resume, but it could entice them to want to go watch you play. And then, of course, it's not the event, it's what you do with it. That's the most important thing. The other main business organization, I should say, that it does showcases, which is Perfect Game. And Perfect Game, I would say, is more nationally known. But I will say that it's from what I take, and I'm not affiliated with either one of these organizations, obviously, as you can tell, but it's valuable if you're a national player, if you're somebody who is one of the top players in the country, or somebody who maybe more so on the West Coast maybe than the East Coast. But I prefer PBR because of the cost, and then it's also, again, as I was saying before, more college coaches just use PBR. I talk to college coaches nearly every day. I just don't hear of that many who are sending me Perfect Game profiles at all. So it's more expensive to go to Perfect Game. I think they do a good job. It's not that anything to do with that. It's just more so for my own clients. I'm looking at, okay, like what's the best bang for your buck? And from what I've gathered, it's PBR. Now, what I recommend is just to go to one event per year. You don't need to go to several events time and time and time again, because as I was saying before, everyone thinks that if they just improve their metrics a little bit, that's going to somehow get them on different follow lists of college coaches. And that's just not how it works. I recommend one per year, because one every 12 months, like, you should be able to show that you've improved, you've gotten stronger, you're hitting the ball harder, you're throwing the ball harder, all these different things. And so coaches, they just want to see improvement. They're more interested in seeing improvement, and whether you go to a million of them or not, that's up to you, but it's not necessary. And so part of why I wanted to do this seminar was to kind of, we could cut right to the chase of what you need to do and don't need to do. Okay, now we're going to talk about the recruiting timeline for players. So we talked about for coaches. Now we're going to talk about for players. And this is the biggest thing that I see on the player side is, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of people in July who reach out to me and want help on recruiting, because at that point, they're panicking and things like that. Whereas if you just planned ahead, it makes things a lot easier. So freshman year, I'm going to go through a year by year. So freshman year, and I just got the phone with somebody who's a freshman. And I'm like, look, this is the time when we're just focusing on getting bigger, faster, stronger, and developing our skills. Because there's not a college coach in the country that is looking at a freshman right now. So don't worry about what your game changer stats say or what point streak says or anything like that. Just focus on getting really good, really strong, and getting your skills as good as possible. And then obviously from a grade standpoint, we're taking care of business there as well and getting the best grades as possible because that can get you a ton of money off of your scholarship down the road. So that's freshman. Next is sophomore. This is when we really lay the foundation. I start recommending that you start researching colleges as a sophomore, just looking at academic, athletic fit, just trying to figure out, what you like from a size standpoint from a school, just because there's so many different schools out there. And I think it's important to just start thinking about like what type of environment do you want to be in? As I said earlier, it's the most important question is figuring out like what you're trying to do, what your end goal is. And so I think once you can start researching different schools, that's going to be helpful. And then also sophomore year, I would say you start to maybe build your target list. I would aim for 10 to 20 programs, and then you're just trying to find schools that maybe match your academic and athletic ability, and you're mixing levels. Like don't just include solely Division One, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. Like of course everybody wants to play there, but mix all levels because there's good baseball at all levels. And because of the transfer portal, I mean, I've personally helped players and work with players in the transfer portal too. I've had several players go from Division Three to Division One and Division Two to Division One. And I'm probably going to have another kid who's going to go from NAI to Division One this summer. So just because of the way the college baseball works, like it doesn't matter where you start, it matters where you finish. And so don't worry about necessarily going D1 out of the gate. I'd rather you be starting at Division One when you're a junior than sitting the bench as a freshman, having to go and do the JUCO route because at the fall break because you weren't getting any playing time, and then we got to go through the whole process again. So that's what I would recommend. And then I would update these programs as you go. So as you play more and more and get into your junior year, maybe you start realizing like, hey, Tennessee is not going to be on my radar, and you start changing that. Or maybe I want to major in something specific that only certain schools have, or I want to stay closer to home than I thought, and just continue to update it as you get a little bit older, and then you have more data on yourself too. And then also sophomore year is when I say this is when you should probably start building your online presence. I know I see people on there even earlier than that, but it's just not necessary because coaches aren't even looking yet. And I would say the main thing is you're posting video clips that you can clearly see something. So if I go on Twitter and I see that someone has, a ton of video on one tweet or whatnot, and I have to like click in on it and see, it's important to understand like human behavior when it comes to coaches, and coaches are no different than everyone else in the world. Like there's information overload, and so if something becomes hard for them to consume, or if it's going to take energy, their brain wants to conserve energy, and so a lot of times they'll just move on to somebody else because there's just so many options out there. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to evaluate your video clip online. Other thing is making sure that there's no private accounts. You're pinning your best video. I put something out there online the other day, which I think got a few people upset when I said, not worrying about retweeting everybody else. And the reason why I said this is because when college coaches, as I just said, go to your profile, if they have to dig and dig and dig to find video, they're done. They're going to go to somebody else's profile. So if you really want to retweet or share one of your teammates' posts, which I think is awesome, what I would do is you can retweet it, and then 24 hours later, you go back and unretweet it. That way, you've helped out your teammate. It's boosted their post in the algorithm, and then you're able to still have a clean profile in case somebody comes to watch or comes to your profile to view you. Junior year, this is when you start reaching out more, contact the schools and coaches you're interested in. I would recommend, if it's a player, I would recommend more Twitter than email, and I'll get into why a little bit later. Start attending the right camps, and this is when, again, you need to figure out where you're a realistic fit at, which it's important to get a third party like myself fit, just because Otherwise, how do you know what's realistic? I personally thought I was a realistic fit to go to Kentucky, and thank you that never happened because I would have sat the bench and been very unhappy. So, attending the right events, start reaching out junior year, staying active on social media, you're posting clips, workouts, things like that. As I said before, coach friendly. And then junior summer, heading into senior year, like that's when things get really serious. Like I said, D1 all the way down to JUCO is all recruiting players summer heading into senior year. And then senior year, it's pretty much a byproduct of junior year. Just going to continue to keep reaching out, use email or Twitter. I would say most of the time Twitter, unless you're emailing D2, D3 schools, NAI, and JUCO, then you can go email because they don't get as many emails, so they're more likely to respond. Attending the right camps, and then making sure when you do camps that you're reaching out before you attend. We don't want to be going to camps and they not have an interest in they're not looking for your position. They're not, even looking for a specific player like yourself. And that's one of the things that I do is I'll reach out to coaches ahead of time for my own clients to make sure that they're not, that they're actually looking for their position and that they're actually going to be interested because that's a lot of time and money in the camps there alone. And then, as I said earlier, same thing with we're staying active on social media, senior year, all the way through. Grades and behavior, we want to make sure none of that's going to be an issue. Okay, so now we're going to get into more metrics, and then now we're going to talk a little bit more about the skill component. All right, we're going to talk about the skill component and just some different things based on position and how coaches view different players just based on their position alone. So metrics, how much do they matter? I did this presentation in the fall. I had some fun with it, so I'm going to go through these slides again. So if I just showed you these specific metrics, who would you recruit? So we got player one. He ran a 6.52 60-yard dash through 87 miles an hour. And then we have player two who ran a 6.8 60 and ran an 86 and throws 86. If you forgot earlier, I mentioned how, hey, just because you run a 6.7 versus a 6.6 to throw 87 versus 86, it's not going to make that big of a difference. I'm going to show you exactly why here, okay? So player two, the guy who had the worst metrics, that was this guy right here, okay? So he ran the 6.8 60, he threw 86. I mean, I could name so many players who have better metrics than that right now who are in high school. It's unbelievable. And that was this guy's senior year. If you don't know who that guy ended up turning into, it's this guy right here who just signed a $300 million contract and is an MLB superstar, was runner-up in MVP last year. The other guy is the guy who's talking to you right now, and he's holding a clipboard when he was 30 years old. And yeah, that's awesome that he got the better metrics, but who got the last laugh at the end of the day, right? And so sometimes even the best numbers don't tell the whole story. And so that's the thing where I hear this a lot from metrics standpoint is everyone's so obsessed about their 60 time or exit velo or this or that. The fact of the matter is like Francisco Lindor, had you watched us from a video standpoint, he had way more upside than I did. He played a premier position. I didn't. There's so many different things from a consistency standpoint, from how he took pitches at the plate to all these different things that metrics don't tell you about. And because they don't tell the whole story. And so I like to share that just to shed a light on, hey, let's not obsess so much about getting your 60 time down a tenth of a second. Let's focus on the things that don't show up when we go to showcases, because at the end of the day, like that's going to make the difference on how far you go as a player. And so metrics are like a job resume. Like they might give you an interview. Like I had some people who came to watch me play, but I definitely didn't get drafted. I didn't end up playing professional baseball in an affiliate or anything like that. So we have to be good. Like if metrics are good, it'll get you looked at, but you have to be very good from a skill component more than anything else. So here are some of the things from a baseball standpoint that coaches are looking for. They're looking for speed, arm strength, bat speed, projection. As I said before, I would say Francisco Lindor projected a lot better than I did from a ceiling standpoint. Consistency, this is the most important thing, is from a baseball standpoint. I could go down and watch Shohei Ohtani play, and he might not do anything for a couple games. But over the course of the entire season, like his numbers are going to be there from a consistency standpoint. And then from a physical and mental standpoint, I've talked to so many coaches. Once they become interested in a player and they'll start to watch them a little bit more, they're watching to see how they react when they don't do well too. That's something you'll hear about. So the first thing is they have to like you as a player and feel like you have potential. Then after that, then they're going to see like, okay, like what type of mental skills, what type of mental toughness do they have? And then the makeup component's huge. I think we forget at times because of travel baseball, college baseball is about winning games. And when you're trying to win as many games as possible, chemistry is so important in the locker room. And so you want to make sure that when you're bringing somebody in, they're not going to hurt that chemistry. Like they're going to make everybody else better around them. And so that makeup component is very, very important. I'm going to talk about now the best player versus the best prospect, because this is something that I get a lot of questions on and a lot of people who are unhappy and frustrated because what ends up happening is, the best player currently on a specific team in high school, they might perform now, they might have better stats, and they're more of a gamer, but they have a limited ceiling. And versus the best prospect may not have the best stats right now, but they have tools, they have upside, they have a body that you look at and be like, okay, like I could see him even continuing to get better. They have room to grow. Maybe they're just trying to figure out their body at this point and just need more reps. And so this is something to understand, that sometimes the best player isn't always the best prospect. And at the college level, recruiting is about what you're becoming. They're not recruiting solely for right now. And I know that may seem contradictory because of the portal and everything like that, but they're looking at, if they're looking at you as a junior in high school, that's a year and a half of between now until you step on fall, or actually 2 years by the time you're spring of your freshman year in college. That's what they're looking at. They don't care about anything prior to that. And so that's just something that I wanted to put in here just in reference, just because I don't want people to be frustrated on why so-and-so is getting offers and so-and-so is not. Well, so-and-so just might project better. He might have more upside. Now, if you continue to produce at a high level, time and time and time again, you're going to eventually jump them. And I like to use this example. My buddy who I went to high school with, his name's Brent Suter. He's a pitcher for the Reds. If you look at him, he was a low draft pick. He produced time and time and time again in the minors, and everybody kept passing him up because he didn't have that upside. But because he just kept producing and producing, eventually they gave him a shot, and he's been in the big leagues ever since. So I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just saying it might take you a little bit longer. So how coaches prioritize recruits by position. So pitchers, this is obviously everybody knows every team is going to need a deep staff, and good pitching always beats good hitting. I have a hitting background, so I don't like admitting that, but that's just the truth. And then next is players up the middle. So that would be shortstop, second base, center field, and then catcher. So they're looking for athleticism, versatility, and then usually the last to go is going to be corner players. So that's first base, third base, and then corner outfielders. Now, the reason why is because if you're a corner outfielder, a coach recruits you to go play for them. If you don't hit well, you don't provide a whole lot of value. Okay. And so that's something just to keep in the back of your mind. So if you don't hit well, you don't provide a value. So they can get somebody who's a shortstop. And if they don't, let's just say they have an overflow of that position, that shortstop, and I hate to admit it because I was a corner outfielder, but they can move that shortstop to left field and then you go on the bench. And I know because that's exactly what happened to me when I didn't hit when I was in college and I was a corner outfielder. So that's another thing to keep. Usually right-handed hitting corner outfielders are normally the last to go for that reason. Outfielders, as I said, corner outfield bat, it's got to be a bat first position. You got to be able to show something consistently. And I think being able to hit consistently is so important. And that's why, hey, it may take a little bit longer in the recruiting process. I've had players who had all the tools in the world, and I've worked with them in the recruiting process. And guess what? They ended up becoming Division I outfielders. Like they ended up getting a spot, but they were last to go. And so being patient is important because of that. And this is something that, again, I'm on Twitter just like everybody else. And so I DM people all the time. This is a college coach that I DM'd. And I said, for this specific player, this program, I said, he just said, just because of position, outfield, if this is for them, they got to be off the charts because they're going to go portal JUCO kids. Every program's different. I'm just showing you an example of one. Now we're getting into power and consistency from a pitching standpoint. So pitchers, that's going to be velocity. It's the first thing that college coaches want to see, whether we like it or not. That just is. Their eyes going to go to the radar gun. And first of all, I think Chase Burns got a little lucky there. I don't think that's really a strike, but velocity is going to be king. And velocity also helps the off-speed pitches become nastier too, because you're able to throw those off-speed pitches a little bit from a different spin standpoint. You're able to spin it better and everything else like that. So that's why velocity is important. But just as important is the consistency. So velocity might get you seen, but in order to get out, it's like we have to throw strikes. And so what does command actually look like? So one walk every 2 innings, I would say is about average. 3 walks per 9 innings is very good. And if you're walking one guy per 9 innings, like that's elite stuff right there. And this is the number one thing if when people reach out to me in the transfer portal and help, for example, or recruiting process, it's a hard sell if you don't throw strikes. College coaches don't care how hard you throw a ball for. It's the truth. As I said before, this isn't professional baseball where it's about development. This is about producing when you get to college campus. And so if you can't throw strikes and you can't prove that there's a chance you can develop into somebody who can throw strikes, it's just going to be really, really difficult for you to get innings. From a position player standpoint and a power standpoint, it's all about in-game power. There's so many people that I've worked with now who, if you watch them in a batting cage, or even if you watch them with hit tracks on or whatever, they wouldn't light up anything. It wouldn't look that impressive, but they have in-game power. They produce in the game. They get to good contact position in the game, good timing, all these different things. And because of that, they hit for power. So it's exit velocity from a position player standpoint. It's going to be arm strength. It's going to be raw speed, all these different things. And you don't need to be elite in all 3 of them, but you definitely can't be below average in all of them either. And so just having a few of these, the more you have, the better. And then the next part is just going to be the consistency part of it. Obviously, we all like watching home runs. I'm no different. And it's like from a position player standpoint, if you look at what's going to separate position players from Power 4 to mid-major D1 and D2 is, how many corner infielders do you see at the high school level being able to make a play like that? Bang, bang, running in like that. Like that's something that shows power, arm strength, athleticism. There's just so many different things, range. And so a lot of times this is what separates players. It's the power component. That's why getting strong is important, combined with the consistency and skill set. So as I mentioned, we're talking about consistency next, position players. And what does that look like? It means just barreling up the ball a lot. It means making good swing decisions at the plate, making all the routine plays, and just having baseball IQ in general. And then lastly, it's like, what type of teammate are you? It's easy to be a great teammate when you're hitting well, all right? But like, what are you like when you're 0 for 4? Are you on the bench sulking, or are you like up on the bleachers or wherever you're at, and you're actually like cheering your teammates on? That's what they look at. And then as a consistency standpoint, it's making the routine plays, making the plays that you're supposed to make. Everyone loves practicing the diving plays, and I get it. It's a lot of fun, but the majority of plays that you make are the routine ones. And if you can make the routine ones 99% of the time, you're way more valuable than somebody who may have more range than you, but can't make the routine plays consistently. It's just another example right here. Just being fundamentally sound. Another thing, going back to the fundamentals. From a hitting standpoint, they're going to look at your mechanics. They're trying to see, hey, is this a swing? Is this movement that can translate to our level? Or is this something that they might struggle to be able to adjust to off-speed pitches because they're constantly lunging out front, or there's something major majorly wrong. They're not trying to dissect every single mechanical muscle fiber that you would think just based on what you see on Twitter, but they're just trying to see, is this a good swing that I think can hit high level pitching? And then the most important skill, I believe, is swing decisions, whether or not, what pitches you swing at versus what pitches you take. And the higher up you get, it's going to depend on how far you go in this game is how well you control the strike zone. You got this guy in the mound throwing 100 plus miles an hour. If you want to play power four baseball, you got to be able to control the strike zone. Otherwise, why would he ever throw a strike? He would just throw it outside the zone. And then also the baseball IQ. I think this is something that maybe is overlooked a little bit. It's not overlooked by college coaches, I can tell you that, because as I said before, it's about winning. Being able to see the play ahead of time, one step before it happens, and whether it be backing up runners or throwing to the lead base in this situation or whatever it is, all stuff extremely important that coaches will look at. And I would say the other thing too is college coaches, this is kind of an art. Even if they're at your game and you're like, oh, he wasn't at my game, he was on his phone. There's an art to coaches pretending like they're not paying attention and actually are. And the reason why is, well, there's a lot of reasons why. One, they don't want anyone else to know what player they might be on because they're competing. That's why earlier I had the analogy about every program's like its own business. You don't want to give your secrets away to business down the road because then they'll make more. So part of it's that, and then part of it is they don't want you to think that they're paying attention. They want to see how you react when you don't think anyone's paying attention to you. And there's some typical other stuff. I'm trying to hit all the positions here from a catching standpoint. Being able to frame, that's obviously very important. Being able to throw, have good arm action, good mechanics, things like that too. Look, all coaches know that everyone lies about their pop time. The only pop time that matters is the one that happens in game. Everything else, it doesn't matter. Now we're going to talk about the last part of this, and then we'll get to Q&A, and that's just going to be research on the programs. So I would start exploring options now, figuring out like, okay, like you're taking tour of colleges near your home, or maybe if you're on the road, just walking around different schools, trying to figure out what type of campus you like. Do you want a bigger school or smaller school? So you're looking at different size, maybe even go to a game. And then this helps you just figure out like what type of environment do you want and what feels right before baseball even enters the equation, because it may be where it's like I actually just want to go to a smaller school and I like that environment better. I don't want to be dealing with tons and tons of people left and right, and so maybe that's for you. And then now we're talking about like how do you get found. And I'll be honest, I've thought about this, and as simple as possible, like there's really only two ways players get recruited. A college coach just finds you on his own, which is pretty rare just because of, I mean, one, for right now, for example, they're in season and then they go directly into the transfer portal and looking for players. And then they go out and start watching games. And as I mentioned before, they don't just go to random games. So they're collecting lists from different college coaches, or I'm sorry, different travel coaches, high school coaches, people like myself. And so that's exactly what I do is I get players' names in front of college coaches to go and watch them play. And I'm saying that obviously because I'm giving this presentation, but there's other people who do this too. And, it could be like a travel coach or a high school coach or whatever. The only thing is like just at time, like they have their own job to do too. And so they only have so much time on their hands when it comes to promoting players to college coaches. And earlier I talked about cold emails, and I think if you're sending emails to D2 below, I think that's one thing. But a lot of times cold emails to Division I coaches, it's like getting 1-800 calls. They get so many of them. I mean, and you start getting a lot of these 1-800 calls or emails, you don't pick it up because they're not in your contact. Like, you don't know who it is. There's no relationship. Like they don't trust it. And so college coaches, they just treat a lot of cold emails the same way, or since they don't know who you are, a lot of times they're not going to respond. And then trusted contacts. As I said before, this is what moves the needle more than anything else. This is a relationship based business where people just rely on people that they trust. And that's exactly what I do as a college recruiting advisor. Is from the main thing that I help with is just, for one, the first thing is the evaluation, is figuring out where you are, where you need to go, what level is the best fit for you, your recruiting timeline, understand what you need to improve, and then just give objective feedback. So that's the most important thing, is the evaluation piece. And I would say for me personally, it's, as I said, the trusted contacts, the network that I have. I've been pretty lucky to be able to place players all across the country and work with different coaches at all levels. And so that's something that has been a ton of fun for me, whether it be locally where I'm at or nationally too. And I'm looking forward to continue to do that at all levels. So that's kind of my own. This is like my own setup from a recruiting standpoint of everything that is included with my own personal clients. And I think the main thing is, a lot of times I'm reaching out to programs looking for their skill set and then feedback from college coaches on their evaluation. So if one of my players goes to one of their camps, I'm messaging them, seeing what they thought of them, getting feedback, and going from there. If you're interested in a 30-minute recruiting evaluation, you can just put this QR code just with your phone. What I'll also do too is I'll put a link in. Whoops. Sorry for the screen sharing then. I'll put the link in the chat box too. So in case you're watching on your phone. And then any questions. So anybody have any questions right now? If you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. There we go. All right. I just put the link in the chat as well. And then if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat right now. Sorry, I was hoping to keep it under 30 minutes. And Anthony, any idea on cost? I assume you mean for the recruiting service. It's just going to depend on. It's hard for me to give. I don't have like necessarily like specific costs. So I would say if you really want to know the cost, just send me a personal email, and just let me know the situation, because there's different types of programs that I have. Okay. Is Twitter the best? I'm going to read the question out, then I'm answer it. Is Twitter the best vehicle to use to share videos with coaches? Yes. If you're doing it on your own, yes, Twitter is probably going to be the best, because they're less likely to have be bombarded by a lot of things in other areas. How valuable is the high school your son is currently playing at in the recruiting process? That's a good question. It's valuable if your son's on one of the top programs in the country. If not, then it doesn't make that big of a difference. And honestly, even if he is on one of the top programs in the country, he's got to make sure, obviously he's got to be playing. So that's another element with that too. So not a huge thing unless you're on one of the best teams in the country. What age do you recommend to start working with you? My kid is 12. 12's too young. I don't work with anybody that young. Usually I would say probably reach out to me at the end of his freshman year. I would say maybe at that point, then we can start talking. But I don't really like starting to work with people if I can't actually work with them. Like, I want to get going and start sending videos and things like that to coaches right away. So since I can't do that until he's older, I would do exactly what I recommended with the freshman doing on that slide, where it's about building the foundation, getting as good as possible from a strength standpoint, a skill standpoint, everything like that. And then I would say at that age too, I just want them to have as much fun as possible. Like, I want them to love the game, and love the game even more when they're 17 than right now. Thoughts on local showcases? PBR. Yeah. So, Taylor, good question. I don't know if you're able to see that part of the seminar, but I would recommend PBR, just because it's cheaper, and more college coaches are on PBR and looking at those metrics and things like that. Had somebody ask a question I saw about did somebody ask about rankings? Oh, how seriously do college coaches take player rankings? They'll look at the player rankings. I mean, of course they're going to look at them, but if you're ranked 75th versus 45, doesn't matter. If you're like top 10 or top 15 or something like that, like, sure, that might help, just because they'll look at those rankings to see. But if you're outside of those top players, it's not going to move the needle that much. Yes, I can send a link to the recording I did. This is being recorded, so I will send that out. I think I have all the questions on here. One more. Okay, not a problem. Perfect. Well, I appreciate everybody for coming on. If you have any other specific questions, again, you can feel free to send me an email, or if you want to meet with me, you can click the URL link for a 30-minute meeting. But hopefully this was beneficial. Oh, we got one more question. Do kids need to play? Oh, we got some more good questions here, actually. Do kids need to play high school ball, or can they get recruited through showcase travel ball only? I would recommend them playing high school baseball. And yeah, the competition may not be as good, but high school baseball is a lot closer to college baseball when it comes to winning and teammates and being around your teammates and things like that too. So it's more so from not necessarily from a skill standpoint, but it's more so from like an emotional standpoint, if anything, because it's way more closer to what college is going to be like than travel ball. And we want them to start thinking about winning games. How often do colleges ghost players? They ghost players all the time, unfortunately. And there's several reasons why. But yes, that does happen quite significantly. Again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, they don't have a relationship with them. So that's gonna happen. What travel ball tournaments are coaches not now showing up to? Didn't see them at many tournaments this past summer at 16U. Yeah, as I was saying, Dave, earlier, the first 3 weeks of June, you're not going to be seeing very many college coaches at all, Division One coaches specifically, because they're transfer portal. They're going to a lot of summer college games. They're trying to fill spots in which they thought they lost or they did lose from their past season. And then so usually after that, there's like a 4 to 6 week window, and the Division One coaches are going to be going to the bigger tournaments, the different Lake Points, and it depends on where you are in the country. And then everybody else, a lot of the D2, D3, NAI, and JUCO aren't going to travel a whole lot. So they're going to remain in their region. So let's just say you're in the Midwest. Those schools aren't going probably all the way down to Georgia to recruit players. They're staying in the Midwest. So that's why it doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you're a Division One player. If you're not a Division One player, it doesn't make sense to be traveling all over the country because college coaches aren't traveling over the country who are in who are in your area and at that level of D2 to JUCO. Our question: are many D1 college coaches even recruiting at the high school level or just relying on the portal? Both, both. Every program is different, and since every program's different, everyone does a little bit differently. I would say the mid-major division ones, yes, because the mid-major division one programs, they don't rely a whole lot actually on the transfer portal because, and I don't want to, I guess I'll just tell you exactly how it works. But the reason why is because let's just say, I'll just throw an example, okay? So I live in Cincinnati. I travel over the country, but I live in Cincinnati. So let's just say Wright State, for example. So Wright State, I would consider them a mid-major school. Wright State's not going to do very much in the transfer portal because if they go in the transfer portal, who are they going to get that they really want? They don't want to go to they don't want to go in the transfer portal and get somebody who just sat the bench at another mid-major D1 and someone at a Power 4 school who just sat the bench. They don't want them either because they just sat the bench. So if anything, they may get a Division Two or Division Three, but more likely they might go JUCO. So a lot of times the transfer portal, a lot of it's for the Power 4 and then sprinkled in here or there for the mid-major. But every program's different. There's some programs they do 33, 33, 33. 33% they do high school, 33% they do JUCO, 33% they do transfer portal, right around there. Others are just high school. Others are just transfer portal heavy. Kentucky is a great example. If you look at Kentucky, it just transfer portal heavy. So everyone's different. Yes, I've worked with Canadian players. I have a Canadian player actually committed to Utah, 2025. Midwest guy here. How much does that hurt? It doesn't hurt at all being in the Midwest because there's so many college baseball programs in the Midwest. If you look at the map of where most of the college baseball programs are, it's in the Midwest. I mean, sure, it's in the South too, of course, but there's a ton in the Midwest, so you're not missing out at all. There's so many good tournaments in the Midwest, Grand Park, all these different places where there's tons of college coaches that we even fly in to go watch. Can you help a JUCO player move up? Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I've had several JUCO players that I've already worked with and have been able to place them. If you go to a JUCO and you put up numbers and produce, I'll be able to help you get anywhere. What's the best way to get a realistic evaluation of your player's talent? Well, honestly, what I would do is if you sign up, I hate to sound like this, but if you just sign up for the 30-minute consultation, I can tell you exactly a realistic evaluation. I put that link in the chat. And the only thing I would ask is I would put some video in there or metrics or something just to help me be able to give an evaluation, just be able to see where he's at. But if I have some video and just a metrics, even just video alone, I can give a pretty good answer of where they're at. Yep, video. Thoughts on a young 2028 freshman? My son is very young and won't graduate. Yeah, I mean, I guess what Taylor, what's your question when it comes to your son, your 2028 son? Let's see. Did any other questions? We'll get ready to wrap it up here. Hopefully this was very valuable. I like doing stuff like this. It's a lot of fun. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, Taylor, their son's very young for their age. Yeah, so I think, yeah, yep, definitely. I wouldn't say he's at a big I mean, yes, I actually I take that back. He's at a disadvantage just because of him being so young, and in 12 months at your son's age is a huge advantage. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can really do about it unless you hold him back. He's not going to be evaluated any differently than everybody else. So that's just kind of the way it is. But he has more upside for sure, just because he is a lot younger, and so that could be something where, you sell that to college coaches, or maybe, that ends up being he starts at a lower level and moves up. So probably his best baseball is ahead of him just because he's younger. So yeah, he's technically at a disadvantage just because of his age, but over time he'll catch up. Thank you. Appreciate it. Not a problem. Glad it helped. Glad it helped. No problem, Taylor. Thank you. And I think what I might end up doing going further, going doing when I do this again, because I'll eventually do this again, is might get more in depth into specific parts of the recruiting process. I try to give a generic overview here. Maybe one time I'll go really in depth into um, player development. Colleges love hearing about the colleges you highlight. They focus on player development. Yep, for sure. But maybe I'll get, in depth into high academic schools, and then maybe into Division II. Or that's the thing. What makes this pretty difficult is this is such an individual process for each player, each family, because there's so many different things at play from a skill level, an academic standpoint, a financial standpoint. And so that's why it's hard to give generic advice. I do the best I can. I think Q&A probably helps the most. But that's why I'll probably start getting more specific in certain areas, just because, and just going more, instead of going wide and shallow, more narrow and deep on different topics, which I know may not be applicable to as many people, but I think could be more beneficial. Any last minute pearls of wisdom for catchers? Yeah, catching it's such a valuable position. I mean, everyone's always looking for catchers, so I would recommend sticking with that as long as possible. Especially if you can swing the bat a little bit from a catching standpoint. Look, I mean, from a catching standpoint, well, obviously you need to have good arm strength, pop time in game, though that's the only time it matters, framing, things like that. But also some of the stuff that doesn't show up from a leadership standpoint, how you go and work with the pitcher. Are you showing up the pitcher when he throws the wrong pitch, or you have a pass ball or whatever it is like that too. Those are little things that I notice anyway, and they don't show up on any stat sheet or metrics, but you're the leader of the field really out there. So that's something that it's important to take in consideration from a catching standpoint is you have to be the voice out there. When it comes to metrics, will a college coach tend to follow a 6'1" player over the 5'11" player with the same metrics? Good question. I would take that one step further. Do they hit right-handed or they hit left-handed? If they hit left-handed, they're going to go with the left-handed one. I would say that's too close, and a couple inches here or there is probably not going to move the needle that much. Kind of what I was saying before from a metric standpoint, that honestly, if let's just say, for example, I ran a 6'5", Francisco Lindor ran a 6'8". Here I am, by myself in this room, feeling awkward because I'm talking out loud for the last hour and nobody's in here and I can't hear anybody on this. And here, Francisco Lindor is making $300 million in the big leagues. He had better metrics that were close. So I guess what I'm point is it's not going to make that big of a difference. Now, if one of the players was a 6'4" left-handed pitcher who was skinny and the other one was a 5'11" left-handed pitcher who's a skinny, then that might make a difference. But that close wouldn't make that big of a difference at all. Awesome. Uh, does switch hitting make a big difference? Yeah, if you can switch hit, yeah. The only issue is it's hard enough getting really good at one side. Most of the players that I've had in the past who have tried to switch hit, I actually try to convince them, especially if their natural side is left-handed. I'm like, well, let's just focus on left-handed because it's so hard to be able to get good at both. There's a reason there's only been a couple Hall of Fame hitters who have been switch hitters. I mean, if you think about it, of all the Hall of Fame hitters, there's only been a few that have been switch hitters. And there's a reason for that because you have to be just as good at one side as the other. So I would just focus on getting really good at whatever side comes natural. Hopefully that's the left side. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for coming on. Appreciate it. As I said earlier, if you have any follow-up or want to do a recruiting consultation, I put the link in there and I'll, again, appreciate it again. And shout out to my mom. My mom was on this call the entire time. I appreciate it. Love you, Mom. Thank you. Appreciate it.